Malcolm Hoenlein is with us. We call this the Weekly Update, Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. Mr. Hoenlein, welcome back to JM in the AM.
Thank you, Mr. Segal. It's great to be with you, as always.
I appreciate it.
It's a dreary Friday morning in New York and sunny in Israel.
Your neighborhood got hit hard yesterday by the bad weather.
I think all the neighborhoods got hit hard by the thing, and we had exploding, what do you call those?
Manhole covers?
Yeah, manhole covers exploding in one place, and I heard a lot of sirens yesterday, but I don't know what it was about.
Did yesterday's rough weather make it difficult for people to get to the polls? You know, Malcolm, this coming Tuesday will be the final day that somebody who's a New York City resident and registered voter can actually vote for the mayor of the city of New York. Did yesterday prevent a lot of people from getting to their polling station?
Well, yesterday the polls were actually closed at 5, so it was a shorter day than the others where it was some nights it was 8 o'clock, even 9 o'clock, I think. So the turnout, the early voting has been very strong in our neighborhoods, in Borough Park, and some other communities, record numbers actually for some of them. And it's a hopeful sign, but it's only the beginning. Unless everybody goes out and every vote cast smartly for the person who can beat Mamdano, nothing else really matters, not whether it's a popularity contest or you like or don't like or some past stuff. Right now we have a specific challenge, and it's being watched not just all over New York and all over America, but all over the world.
Yeah,
it's amazing to see how much attention is focused on it.
Yeah.
And you know that there are many other races like this across the country, people running for mayoralty races, but about 800 Muslims running for office. Unfortunately, some of them with contacts like he to extremist elements. And it's not a religious issue. It's an issue of ideology. And he has spelled out clearly what his ideology is and where he stands on the issues. And more stuff comes out, including his latest thing about, that when the policeman's foot is on your neck, the lace is tied by Israel or by the IDF.
Yep.
Constantly stuff is coming out showing what he, his father, others related to him, but mostly what he has had to say. A guy who missed 80% of the votes in his short stint in the assembly, which is the only job he's ever had. So I think for all reasons, people should be looking at this very carefully, and the conclusion should be clear.
A couple of big gubernatorial races as well. I mean, you alluded to the fact that nationally there's a lot of stuff going on, but there's a lot of stuff going on where our communities in certain states and local areas can really have an impact.
Yes, because differences on these elections can be very small, especially when you don't have presidential elections. The turnouts tend to be low. And as you saw in the primary, 10% voted, I think, of the eligible voters had more voted. We wouldn't be in this circumstance.
Have you made a commitment to talk us off the ledge 1 week from today, or are you not going to even address the possibility of who might win for mayor of New York until Wednesday morning?
I'm selling parachutes. So
I'll tell you, we should joke about that because it's a terrible metaphor. But the reality is that that if he does win, starting Wednesday, you and other leaders are going to have to really figure out a way to adjust the community to think a certain way.
Well, I don't know that we have to adjust. I think he has to adjust. I think we have to learn the lesson and make sure that young people, older people, and that the pattern that was set with what the Sephardi community in terms of not letting people send their kids or register, get seats in for the Yom Noraim unless they were showed that they were registered, to see the organization that has taken place. And the Flatbush Jewish Community Coalition, which I have the privilege to be honorary chair, I think really led the way and worked on this day and night, but so did other communities. And we're seeing it reflected in the numbers, and it's reflected in the fact that we see how little was done in the past, and that we need to really sustain this year-round. This can't be just a one-shot deal, and that next year there are going to be critical elections, and the gubernatorial election. And when we see what how the governor conducted herself during this, I think a lot of people will have strong views on it.
Right.
That the races, they're all important, and this is an organized effort. I think 10 years ago, I spoke on the show about it, maybe 9 years, but certainly when we had seen the patterns starting to emerge of this is a coordinated, consistent plan, starting electing people to the local levels and to assembly. And it said that that's the stepping stone to run for higher office and higher office, Congress, governor, Senate, other things as well.
And by the way, and I know we have to move on to other topics, but hey, this is timely and important. Anybody who thinks that this effort is now going to end, I hope they're wrong. And you would know this because you're surrounded by people who are actively hitting the streets, registering people constantly. As you just pointed out, down the road, whether it is governor, whether it's another election for mayor years from now, whatever it is, if this effort continues to really mobilize our community, we're only going to benefit from it. So people really shouldn't be despondent because the battle is not over. No matter what happens on Tuesday, the battle's not over, and there's potential to really make a difference as we approach the future.
Look, I think there's plenty of reason to be concerned, but you're absolutely right. The mayor has limited powers. We'll see what the governor will do. We'll see what President Trump will do. And holding city council members and others and state elected officials. Unfortunately, you have DSA members dominating the city council, the Democratic Socialists. But you're absolutely right. This is the beginning. I think it started a new awareness.
Right.
I'm not sure yet that people are prepared to invest and make the effort necessary, but I think it has been certainly revolutionary now. And I hope that the Shabbos afterwards, everybody else says, learn the lesson.
Right. Learn
the lesson from this. And that we must, if you want to protect the billions of dollars we've invested in this city, people talk about, they'll run, they'll go move. You can't move from all of the yeshivot, all of the mikvahs, all of the schools. Think about it. It's billions and billions of dollars we have invested here, let alone the communities and the people who can't afford to move.
Yeah.
So don't be glib with not you, but people shouldn't be glib about this. This is a huge challenge and not one that can be simply solved by saying, Texas or Florida or stuff.
Right.
And there's no evidence. And every place in America is going to have problems as well.
And when we and just one final point, there are people who are listening to this and sort of picking up that we're talking about a fait accompli for Tuesday, and may feel like there's no reason to go out and vote because their vote now will be meaningless. You have seen plenty, and this is the benefit of having someone do the weekly update who's been on this scene for decades. You have seen plenty of times where the polls say 45 to 25, and the 25er comes back and wins even at the last minute. So don't give up hope. Just go out there and do what you can. In this case, just go out there and vote.
Quite the opposite, Nachum. You're making a vital point that people shouldn't believe those polls.
Right.
Because, for instance, our communities are underpolled. We hardly register on it. They don't know all the people who have come now and registered and the new people coming, just as the young vote, let's say, is unpredictable, or was unpredictable, that he was able to attract so many of them.
Right.
But I can tell you that the initial turnout, the early turnout, had many, many people over 50, which is a positive sign. And I think it definitely is numerically possible. It would have been much more possible had there been only one candidate, but I still believe that if everybody focuses on the person they believe it can beat, Mandami, then I think the numbers could be there.
All right, here's my take on yesterday's rally in Israel, because I'm trying to, continue to be a unifying force, if that's possible. And you've encouraged it. You've encouraged Achdus in our community, and I'll use I'll take advantage of the fact that I host this show to say what I have to say before I turn to you for your comments and reaction. On one side, I did understand that the quote-unquote Haredi community was really, essentially, not really protesting against army service or against, I think they were protesting, and this is what they were trying to convey, that we should not be at the point where we're just throwing random draft dodgers into jail. And I sympathize with that, and I'll tell you why in a second. On the other side, Well, okay, let me tell you first why I sympathize with that. I sympathize with that because this has been such a divisive issue, handled so poorly, politically, socially, religiously. It's been handled so poorly for decades, I would say since the Yom Kippur War, that to resort to now just throwing, random draft dodgers into jail, I don't know if that's the best way to get onto the road of a solution. That's number one. On the other side, however, Malcolm, if in fact we do believe that one of the antidotes, that October 7th was an antidote for the terrible divisiveness with the whole Supreme Court stuff, the whole judicial reform stuff that was going on in Israel. I don't know if 10 minutes after the war, quote unquote, ends, I don't know if it really ended yet. I don't know if 10 minutes, there should be 1 million people, or whatever the number is, protesting anything in Israel in that fashion. I've said what I have to say. What's your reaction?
So to take hundreds of thousands of people out, and clearly what was not well enough organized, that you had a fatality, that people were climbing on cranes, not coming down, that other acts that I think are Chil Hashem, as opposed to people demonstrating for principle and for, we believe it's inviolate, that Torah study has to be seen as a vital enterprise and a legitimate endeavor. But at the same time, there has to be a sense of achrayut. There has to be a sense that people live up to responsibility. The army can't take everybody. They don't even want everybody. And you see that the increasing numbers of Haredim that are in it. But the image that's created is that religious people don't serve, when in fact a disproportionate number of religious people were killed in this war and are in the leadership, even if they, don't identify with a particular community. But you see the change that has taken place, that others, even Hasidic leaders, have told their people, if you're not learning, go to the army, and serve, or finding alternative service. Then you look at all the guys who are in Hatzalah or Zaka or doing other things, where it's the preponderance of Haredim, that we create the wrong image, and it creates such a division and a cleavage. And at a time when losses were so high and it touched so many families, that they look at that sector and then they say, well, they're not serving, or the Arabs aren't serving, or some other part isn't serving, when there are many who are not, who the army can't take and doesn't take. But they're seeing this as a growing sector of Israeli society, and there has to be a way to work this out. And I see the number of Haredi guys who are being enlisted in programs like Pardes, where they go literally from the base medrash to the Mossad, to the Shin Bet, to the army, to doing research, and they're training. The Gemara learning is actually amazing training for it. So the situation, there's no clarity, and there seems to be only heat dumped on this because it became so politicized and divisive. I understand why, but it's not tolerable at a time when we have paid such a heavy price over the last 2 years. It's a time when there has to be sane minds coming together and trying to find resolutions.
And do you agree with my assessment that it's been handled terribly for decades?
Absolutely. As I said, it became a political football, not a substantive issue.
And also, you were noticeably worried about the division in Israel before October 7th, the judicial reform. Forget about whether you agreed with it or not. You just were very nervous. There was such so much anger in the streets. Didn't that, sort of bring you back to those days yesterday? And didn't you start to worry, we've got to go in a different direction? This is not the way to do it?
My concern before was borne out, because if you listen to what the Arabs say, those who are involved, Hezbollah, Hamas, they looked at those marches and said Israel was weak, Israel was divided, that they wouldn't respond in a unified way to an attack. They read it, and this has been constantly true when our enemies see the divisions within it, like Haman did, throughout history. Whenever there was a lack of achdus, amafuz, amafarad, then they take advantage of it, and this is a danger in what I was alluding to before the war, and that we see it now. And that people who are looking to an election, maybe by June, maybe earlier, it's going to only exacerbate and raise the temperature on this and other divisions. And I would hope that the sane minds would come together and find a way to come up with resolutions as people have in the past. And I think the concern about what is the message that the disunity of Israel, and in fact, I believe there's much greater unity and many positive things that have come out of this about the interaction communities, how the Haredi community, rallied to making all the dinners, all the barbecues, all the things for soldiers, going into Gaza every night, making sure that needs are met. You see how many more people are putting on tefillin because of this, and more Shmir Shabbos amongst people who were marginal before, and even amongst the Hatufim, even amongst the hostages and others. The positive signs are getting completely drowned out because the negative is always easier. It's easier to exploit.
I think there are a lot more segments in the Haredi community than we think. We like to lump everybody together. I think it's much more segmented than we think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a good point. Malcolm Hoenlein with us, weekly update, and this is America's one and only Jewish Moments in the Morning radio program, heard on listeners-sponsored digital radio. Around the world, web at NachumSegal.com and the Nachum Segal Network, and of course, the beloved NSN app. Our fundraiser, our year-end fundraiser has gone live. There is a recurring donation monthly option that's now really prominent. You'll see it. Go to the top banner at NachumSegal.com, and I thank everybody who insists on being among the earliest of donors to our campaigns. We could just keep on going. That's our goal, just to keep on going. You mentioned the hostages. So what's the update? Is the update that 2 bodies have now been returned in the last 24 hours? That would leave 11 deceased who we're still waiting for. Am I accurate on that?
Yes, you are. One an 85-year-old, one a 35-year-old, and it's a relief for the families because they can finally come to terms. They get some closure. But obviously, we see that these are people, they were killed in captivity. And, the world just ignores it, doesn't hold them to account, that the Red Cross does not have to account nobody for all of their failures during this time. And, the fact that Hamas is showing its true colors by playing with the emotions of the families and its inhumane thing and the exposure by that video of the fact that they were staging the release. I mean, this was something that shocked a lot of them, embarrassed people who were allowed defenders, not enough care as they find out the details of the abuse and the suffering that those who were retired alive, but those who were killed, because the forensics indicate, some of the things that they endured in captivity.
Yeah.
And that this is, but that video showing that they dug it up and then hid it, try to hide it, and make it like they returned to the Red Cross to inform them of their discovery of the body when it was all a sham. And as we learn about many other things here that were made up, the numbers, of course, and the casualties, the figures, all of these things, the fact that now leading officials, even from UN agencies, admit that there was no famine and that they had concocted this idea early on, maybe even before the war, before there was any question about food supply. They already had determined that they would start using the term famine and accuse Israel of not supplying food, when the officials said there was at least 3 months worth of food there at all times.
Kiddush question of the week. I don't know if you know, Malcolm, but if you would incorporate all the kiddushes that go on throughout the entire globe on a Shabbos morning, every week you could come up with the most likely thing being discussed at the Kiddush. And the Kiddush question of the week, of course, is, do you believe, this is what one person would ask another at the Kiddush, do you believe that Hamas does know the location of every deceased, every murdered Israeli? So if we were standing with a plate of cholent and kugel together tomorrow morning, Malcolm, and someone approached you and said, hey, do you think Hamas knows the location of the final 11? What would you say?
Let me swallow first. and
you'll do anything to stall your answer.
And where's the Diet Coke, which is probably the most frequently asked question at a Kiddush from people. When other communities get together, it's the Scotch. But anyway, right. Look, I think they know where at least 7 more are.
Wow.
Israel said they knew 9 of the 13. The location is 9 of the 13. Some of those return are amongst the 9. It may well be that they don't know or don't want to know where a couple are, but they want to drag this on as long as possible, and then to look like they're being humanitarian. The Egyptians were allowed in to help look for it. The Red Cross is looking for it. Israel obviously sent in people to look in the areas they control. it's very hard to believe that they didn't know where the bulk were. They knew, and if not, they can find out that they're under rubble is only an excuse to try to focus the responsibility on Israel and Israel's response. These people, most of them were dead long before any of the bombing took place in those areas.
Right.
And so I believe that they will know where, if it's at most, I think there were 2 or 3 that it's plausible that they couldn't find them immediately, but ultimately.
Wow. I mean, we're not at that stage yet where there's definitive information. Right. I'm assuming Israeli intelligence, as you just indicated, 7 out of the 11 are, likely have a location. So it's obviously Israel intelligence that's determining all that, right? This is not the enemy that's releasing the information.
Well, it's both. It's and they're under pressure from some of their quote allies to produce, because the United States is putting pressure, and the president's comments that if they don't deliver, Israel will have to just go back in and do what it has to do. I think right now that they're afraid of that. The remaining leadership of Hamas, it's a transitional period, and while clearly the outcome of the war in most respects is clear, we don't know what the long-term implication is. The fact that we've enshrined the roles of Muslim Brotherhood countries like Turkey and Qatar and given them a platform in Gaza, let alone in Syria or in Lebanon. The disarmament of Hezbollah is going on apace. We know that they exploded so many, the Lebanese army supposedly exploded so many caches of arms that they ran out of explosives and appealed for additional stuff. But many of that was in Palestinian territories in Lebanon. Hamas Hezbollah is refusing to really disarm, as is Hamas, basically. And we have to see whether the pressure will be brought to bear, what the long-term plans will be. The fact that Israel controls 53% of Gaza today, but the 60% of the tunnels remain in the areas under the control of Hamas, that the huge caches of weapons still exist there, and that we have to have a complete disarmament. We have to have that of Hamas, and we have to have their removal from positions of power. And now you see the pressure that the PA be brought in, but the PA is bringing back in a lot of Hamas people. So there's a lot of questions that have yet to be resolved.
It took many decades for us to educate the next generation as to what the green line is, and the green line is green, if I know my history, because literally the marker they used to make that boundary was green, right? Is that the reason it was a green line, if I'm not mistaken?
On the map that they drew.
So now is the yellow line? Don't tell me the yellow line is the yellow line because they used a highlighter. Is that why it's the yellow line, or is there another reason why?
The yellow line is because that was on the map that they agreed on, and that they actually painted the markers in Gaza and put down boulders that were painted in yellow, so there would be no excuse. Because when people from the other side get too close, they can clearly identify and warn them, and then have to take the appropriate action when they become threatening to the troops that are there, and so they painted all of these yellow markers and put up boulders and other things to clearly identify the line that Israel is protecting. But Israel will have to cross those lines too when they come under fire, and when they see that there are threats developing, that they send drones, as they have eliminated people in Lebanon, in Gaza, who even today, this past week, some people were involved in October 7th. We forget that it's 2 years have passed. We also should remember the 480 almost people, soldiers and others, who died since the war began. They come as a statistic, and we should remember all the families and the people who still suffer and who have to maintain these laws, and many of them have families with young children, and we all have to remember.
You saw Avi Goldberg's widow got married this week, and all she talks about is continuity and moving forward. And when we
the
spoke,
people is super.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Superhuman.
When we spoke to her on the air, and she described how her children's attitudes told her this, just remarkable. I mean, just complete heroism and incredible attitude. So yellow has joined blue, white, and green as significant colors in modern Jewish history. And I don't know if you like that, huh? And I don't know if you're right, by the way. I mean, Israel has to go and cross over the yellow line again. Didn't you hear that President Trump, I believe it was 4 days ago, I think that was the day, and I quote, he said, I will decide what's right for Israel. Can they cross that yellow line without Trump/USA permission?
I think that there is coordination. As you know, there is a center that was established that the vice president went to visit and Rubio went to visit, and the prime minister also went to visit in the last week, where Americans are stationed in Israel. They're not fighting. They're not crossing into Gaza, but are stationed there to coordinate. And the public presentation has been that they have to approve when Israel is taking actions, or at least Israel has to inform them. And whether they have a veto power or not has been a subject of discussion. There's a lot of criticism about what the nature of the relationship is, and putting Americans in that position to veto or not to veto what Israel does. I think Israel still maintains freedom of action. I think that there is coordination. I think that's very important, because the negotiations are going to start about what's going to happen in Gaza in the future, and we need to have America and Israel on the same sides. We've seen some changes, even let's let Al Jazeera, a minute change. We see the Jordan border heating up, and we need to have international attention to that. Iran continues to try to smuggle weapons, especially into Yonah Shomron, to the West Bank. And of course, what will happen in Syria is very critical to Israel. So far, they've been able to maintain the positions that they've held, but there's growing pressure.
Plus, can Lebanon disarm Hezbollah?
And that's very critical. And a lot of the infrastructure remains in terms of Hezbollah as well. And I believe Lebanese people want to get rid of it. The question is, the Lebanese army capable of doing it? They have, as I said, made important steps in that direction. But remember that Iran, while they've suffered a big blow and their economy is still in ruins, and their biggest bank, one of the leading private banks, just went under with a $5 billion loss. The situation internally in Iran is bad, but they continue to be able to supply weapons, to engage in support of Hezbollah, announcing new weapons. We shouldn't believe that this has been erased from the scene. Hopefully the pressure, the sanctions and the snapback sanctions from based on the agreement, the old JCPOA agreement, right, that will put additional pressure on them. But the exposures of for instance, this international network that they established, and the threats against Jews around the world, against others, secret communications, Iran is paying a heavy price internationally for its failures. But in Australia, for instance, they had to close the embassy because of the threats that were coming out from it. And you have a guy who has, his name is Sardar Amar of the IRGC. He's a commander of 11,000 strong unit of the Quds forces, and he managed this international terror network which targeted Israelis and Jews worldwide. And there were many more incidents than not. So we should remember that's still a factor. Syria is still a big factor, and the Druze, the Kurds, the others are still trying to maintain their independence, and Israel is protecting them and doing amazing things for them. The only good, bright news was that the president of Argentina got reelected.
Good guy, huh? Good guy.
Sent shockwaves everywhere, that everybody had written him off and thought he would be defeated, or at least a minority. Came in stronger than ever. And it's an amazing thing, in contrast to the election in Ireland that elected a hateful person to be the the president,
There's
although they have limited power. Argentina's president has real power.
There's something authentic about him in Argentina. There's something authentic about him. People appreciate it.
And I was with him at the Kotel. Believe me, he davened better than 99% of the Jews. and his outright standing and crediting it. And he appointed an ambassador to Israel who's a frum guy, a religious guy, and his affinity to the Jewish community. I thought that would have a backlash in Argentina. Clearly, his economic policies and the fact that he's throwing off the yoke of the old ways, which some people in New York seem to want to come back to, and to adopt exactly what those who lived under socialism have rejected.
The embassy point you made was the Israeli embassy in Australia?
No, the Iranian embassy.
Oh, the
Iranian was closed by the government.
The Iranian embassy closed by the Australian government.
Right.
Okay, I misunderstood that because I was about to react with. I guess this is why the Nefesh B'Nefesh event in Australia went so well this week, but now that's completely out of context. But the reality is, it did go well. North America is doing well with Aliyah. Now we see other Anglo countries also doing well with Aliyah.
Tell everybody what a real estate agent told me and motivated me was that every year you wait, you lose one bedroom.
Wow.
And the prices are going up. I showed my wife, we were walking to a Kiddush on Sukkot, and we were on Dubnov Street, for those who know Yerushalayim, and you see towards the valley. We counted 17 cranes working, construction cranes that we could see. 17. And it's everywhere. They're building, and they're building high-rise all over Yerushalayim, just as they're building low-rise trains, which are eating up the whole city, the high-speed railroads, but the light railroads. But it's amazing to see what's going on. So people, now's the time. Don't wait.
Yeah, now is the time, and no matter what amount of time you go back, that was the time as well. And don't wait any longer. Finally, Malcolm, Rabbi Alvin Cass, the chaplain, New York City Police Department. I mentioned his passing. In addition to always enjoying my interactions with him, I mentioned it because I think he represented our community well. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, actually, he was a rabbi of the Midwood Jewish Center, which is a block away from where I am. And now the streets are already blocked by the police. They're towing the cars for like 4 or 5 blocks all around. And Ocean Avenue, for those who drive there, it's going to be closed. And the avenues L and M are closed, and J and M are available. So it's maybe it's K and L. But just don't drive near it. He was remarkable. He used to jog past my house every day.
Oh, is that funny?
And he was very skinny, and I would see him in the winter with a shirt off or just with a T-shirt, and he literally jogged every single day. He moved to Manhattan, but for 50 years he was a chaplain, and
pleasant man.
Was so highly respected in the police department. I didn't realize till I saw these preparations the regard in which he was held there. But
pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm apologizing to those listeners who wanted your reaction to the World Zionist Congress. Maybe we'll do some of that next week. I hate to say it, historians may criticize me. It didn't even make my list this morning. But
it's a good reason why it didn't, and it's been postponed for 2 weeks.
Right, that's
so
true.
There's no decisions.
Right.
But the fact that it became a national political issue with the introduction of Netanyahu's son into this equation, and that it's all backroom deals between the parties, and the elections spend a lot of money and et cetera, and this year there was much bigger participation. The fact is that most decisions are still made in closed doors, right, and in swapping, but the firm participation was much greater. Right. I think people may have come home disappointed because they didn't get final decisions. Right. But frankly, this is the history of the World Zionist Congresses for going back to 100 years.
Yeah, and historians can judge if this episode confirms or does not confirm what many people say about the Prime Minister, but we will not do that now. Malcolm, I thank you. Have a wonderful Shabbos, and we will speak, please God, again next week.
God willing. Have a good Shabbos.
Malcolm Hoenlein with us, our weekly update, Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, Friday morning, Erev Shabbos.